Have you ever had the chance to do this with your credit card? I didn't realize it's so hard to cut it. I think I've done this before and I want to go. Have you ever been able to do that with a card? I just have. And I want you to be able to one day have that feeling and experience if you've constantly been trying to pay off your debts. And I'm gonna do it through sharing my story of how I paid off $30,000 in less than 3 years. And this is going to be a very realistic story. I know that there are YouTubers out there that have shared stories of their success, and sometimes it just seems really unreasonable. Like paid off $300,000 in like 1 year, or paid off $50,000 in like 3 months, and just really extreme examples of paying off debt. And I'm here to tell you that debt usually takes a while to pay off. At the time that I was able to pay off the $30,000 over the span of the 3 years, I had a lower salary of around $40,000 to $50,000. That's typically what most people make. So it wasn't like I was bringing in 6 figures. I had like a high ticket, big income type of salary or job. And I didn't have a partner to split expenses with. I think that is also something that's really important and to make clear, right? As a single Black woman living on my own at some point at the beginning of those 3 years, and then not towards the end, I was able to pay it off. So the reason why I racked up so much debt was mainly a mix of credit card spending and then also purchasing my first car. And this 3-year span took place before COVID. So this would have been like 2016 leading up to like 2019. Like within that time frame, definitely 2016 into 2017 is when I would have started investing, because I started in university, 3rd year. And that was when I started to get the motivation to really save more and start paying down my debts as much as possible. But the main thing that I want to focus on is the fact that it's possible. You can pay off your debts. I've been able to do it. Many other people have been able to do it. And it just takes a bit of focus, mindset, and preparations. So what kind of makes up this $30,000? Main thing was my car. So when I finished graduating university 2018, I needed a car to get to the job that I recently got, maybe like a couple months out of graduating school. So this job would have been like a 45-minute hour drive from where I was living. So I needed a car to get to this job. I was not going to be able to walk or ride my bike. There's no way around it. Even taking a taxi or an Uber would have been super expensive and not worth my while. So it just made more sense to get a car. I was just starting to save, but it wasn't going to be enough in order to pay for a brand new car. And the reason why I wanted a brand new car was my understanding, and based on some of the feedback I was getting from the people around me, my parents, it just made more sense to invest in a brand new car because there would be less maintenance fees because of the age of it. And so obviously the older the car, if you end up getting a used car, you're probably gonna have more issues with it sooner than later. So although I didn't have the money right away, I probably could have just purchased like a cheap like $4,000, $5,000 car. I made the decision to take out a loan, right? And which is most people's reasons for taking out a loan. They don't have the cash ready and available, but they need said investment now that they can slowly pay off as time goes on. So I decided to get a Nissan Versa. That was my first car ever, and it was necessary, right? It was an ends to a mean. The student loan that I had would have been, it was around $20,000. So I was able to, it was probably around like $25,000. So out of that, I was able to pay about $5,000 from that. And then what made me rack up my credit card now was just impulsive spending, you know, traveling before I had the money to travel, which is something I'm still kind of working on at times. And just feeling like I could just pay for it later, right? As long as I was making those minimum monthly payments, it was okay to kind of rack up debt And I got just really careless with it. Eating out with friends, every time, we would meet up, we'd go to restaurants, and you're young, you're in your early 20s, and so like you don't want like experiences and moments to pass you by, so you feel like you need to hop on every single one. And sometimes it was just a matter of spending, thinking I was gonna get it, and then maybe I left the job, and so income wasn't coming in. So yeah, at any given time I'd have around like $5,000 in debt. And so when I say 30,000, it was within those 3 years adding on money to the debt while still paying it off. So I would have maybe paid like $5,000 off of my credit card, but then I would have racked up another $5,000 again that I would have to pay off, if that makes sense. So it wasn't like $13,000 car, $10,000 credit card, and then like whatever the difference was, like student loans. It was just like, it was a cumulative of adding on new debt and then having to pay that off within those 3 years. So outside of paying down more than a monthly minimum, once I got this job out of university, also picking up a side hustle. So I'm someone that's always working. I always want to have money coming in. And at the time I started my job after university, it was a part-time role. So I actually needed another part-time role to supplement my income. And that is where waitressing came in. So I started serving for the first time at a Dave & Buster's. And then eventually from there, I moved on to another small family-owned restaurant. And yeah, any extra money I made from the tips, of course, went straight towards paying my debt. And even the income from the minimum wage, waitress income itself, if I could pull from that, would also go towards my debt. So yeah, it's like part trying to increase your income as much as possible. And even when I eventually was able to shift from part-time to full-time for my career-based role, I still was serving on the side. So maybe it just looked different. Maybe I was serving more in the evenings after work was done, or on the weekends. And so I was really grinding it out. I was working like 6-7 days a week. And it's not that like I'm recommending you do this if you are trying to pay off your debts. I always say grinding is a season. There's a time and a place to hustle. There's a time and a place to go more at the flow, be more, at a steady pace. And then there are times where you pull back altogether and you take breaks and you rest, or maybe you take a gap year, or you prioritize having your weekends off. So that was just the season. I was super young. I had a lot of energy. Maybe the energy that I wouldn't say I have now. I definitely would not be able to grind it out as hard. But at that time in my life, I wanted to, I was motivated to, and I knew that my larger goal was to pay down these debts as fast as possible. And when it comes to side hustles, about 45% of Canadians and Americans have a side hustle or want to have a side hustle. So that's almost like half the population, which is crazy. I'm assuming that the other half have it pretty good. They're probably super young, live at home with their parents, so they don't have to worry too much about certain overhead expenses, or are like super rich and are making a lot of money with just one income to get them by. Or they might be partnered and in a relationship where they're able to split the expenses so the burden isn't as much. If you're outside of that, probably going to have a side hustle or want to have a side hustle at some point. So don't knock the idea of having a side hustle. And then I would say what made it easy too is not only just increasing my income, but finding ways to decrease my spending. So I had to be very mindful of like what I was spending my money on and really practicing value-based spending. So because I started investing in university, a lot of my goals around my finances started to shift. I started to realize that wealth was attainable to me, and it just required me to shift my spending to areas that were decreasing my net worth, and instead shift my spending into areas that will maybe in the short run decrease my net worth, but in the long term build it back up. So for example, going to school. Most people have student loans, and the idea is that yes, you're paying a lot of money up front, but down the road it's going to help you to find a better career that's going to make you a lot of money, and so that you would be in a better position to pay off those debts. And also once you pay off those debts, you would have more than enough money to continue saving and then working towards some of your wealth building goals. And I would say, hands down, the reason why I was able to save faster is by staying with my family, staying with my parents. I think it is a bit of a double-edged sword because for me, staying at home sometimes isn't the best for my mental health. And I know a lot of other people can resonate with that. And so it's always a matter of how long, like I really have to have a timeline in place for how long I am going to stay at home and then when I want to leave, and not kind of get to a place where I feel complacent. But I knew that if I gave myself 2-3 years to really just focus on going to work, paying down my debts as much as possible, then I can eventually make that leap to now go out on my own, maybe even save enough so that I can purchase property of my own. So it wasn't like just going back home just to milk my parents for the rest of my life. It was a way to fast track my journey towards independence, financial independence. And so I would say if you do feel like you are able to thrive in your home environment, in your parents' environment, and you want to use it as an opportunity, especially after graduating out of college, university, I think it's a really smart way to limit your expenses and get ahead faster than other people that may have to still consider rent and then having to save and pay off debt on top of their rent. And we know nowadays the rent is maybe twice as much more expensive than what it was maybe back in 2018, 2017. So during those times or pre-COVID. So that's something to keep in mind. And it doesn't have to just be downsizing by moving back home with your parents, getting creative as to other ways that you can downsize, maybe even where you're renting. I know of people that were really good at finding $300 a month rooms for rent during university and college, So I think just getting really creative, maybe having a roommate, obviously is going to be less expensive than living in a 1-bedroom apartment on your own in a major metropolitan city. So those are all things to consider. Like I said, if you know nothing is forever and it's just for the short term to get ahead, why not? I really don't feel like you're sacrificing much. And it's really up to you. You don't have to, but you can choose how fast you want to pay off your debt or not. How long this timeline is going to be, how short you want the timeline to be. So just keeping that in mind, this is what worked for me. And this is why, this is what I was willing to do in order to pay it down within those 3 years. I could have still done even more in order to pay it down in a less amount of time, but so it is. And so just being consistent over that time really helped me to pay down some of these debts. And then at the same time, I was also saving in the first year that I was working at that job, and I was able to save $5,000 to start investing. So I was someone who was investing as I was paying off my debt. And I know in hindsight, this is actually something that a lot of financial experts don't recommend because the interest on like your credit card or maybe even your car loan could be really high and actually cancel out the gains, the return on your investments that you're making through stocks or whatever other assets. So that was something that I didn't really know until I already started investing a little bit further and down the road. And because of that, I kind of just kept investing because I was already doing it, but I was still trying to pay off my debts as fast as possible, knowing that information. So I'm not gonna say flat out you should not be investing if you do have debt, but if you are like not already investing and it's something that you are planning to do, definitely focus on paying down the debts as much as you can first, and then focusing on the savings, and then having an emergency fund first, actually, which is something I also did not do, but having an emergency fund, 3 months of your expenses tucked away for emergencies, and then focusing hardcore on building out your investments and your wealth portfolio. The last important point I want to make here as to how I was so successful was setting goals. So there's actually a study by the University of Scranton that shows that 92% of people that set SMART goals are more likely to achieve their financial targets than those who do not. That is a big number, 92%. So if you are not setting a SMART goal, you are already at a disadvantage. You are less likely to win. And so I'm going to kind of go through real quick some of the letters. S stands for specific. So this means, what goal are you working towards? Be specific. So in this case, I would say that I am working towards paying off my debts, which include my car loan, some of my student loans, and credit cards. That is being specific. You're not just saying, I want to pay off my debts. What kind of debts? What type of debts do you have? Then M gets into the measurable. So how are we going to know how much to pay off for each? So then I have to figure out, okay, it is going to be $40,000 over the span of 3 years, right? So it's measurable. I have to know in 3 years' time, I'm going to be able to pay that off. I can even break down this SMART goal into something even smaller, like maybe $10,000 by the end of the year to make it seem more attainable, which is the next letter A. How is this going to be attainable? And I know that this is going to be attainable because I have a job and I'm making $4,000 a month, and I know that I don't have to pay rent, really don't have to pay groceries if I don't want to either. So majority of that money that's coming in can go directly towards paying off my car and my credit cards and a little bit of my student loans. So that is how I know it's going to be attainable, right? Realistic, that's how I know it's also going to be realistic, knowing that I have that income coming in. And realistic too in terms of really breaking down those numbers and seeing if the maths and makes sense. So if I had to pay off $10,000 in 1 year, we break that down. That is going to work out to be around $833 a month. So when I do my budget and I look at income, expenses, I want to fit that $833 into my expenses and still make sure that I have money left over to do other things. So I knew that I was going to be good. This is realistic. It's not that I'm trying to pay off $50,000 in 1 year. That definitely would not be realistic, especially with a $4,000 monthly income coming in. So sometimes we have these lofty dreams and it seems reasonable, but really, how are you going to do it? We really need to break it down into the tiny details and specifics, because then you might catch yourself in being like, whoa, like this is a very far-fetched goal. This is very extreme. This is going to limit me in being able to do X, Y, Z. So you want to know clearly how much you're willing to sacrifice in order to get this goal. Then I would say then the last one is timeline. T stands for timeline, and the timeline has to be reasonable too. I didn't know going into paying off my debt what the timeline would be, so I didn't set a SMART goal for that specific journey, but it is something that I set now, and in hindsight, looking back, I would have tried to better lay out how to sooner pay off my debts. And I believe if I had set a SMART goal, I probably would have been able to pay off my debts in half that time, in 1.5 years, or maybe even less, because of how limited my expenses was. Like I said, also depending on if I did want to take that extra trip and things like that, maybe I would have thought twice about taking them. So not regretting my journey. I had a lot of fun in my early 20s, but seeing where I am now, I definitely would have had a stricter plan in place. So I was just putting away as much money as I could. But I feel like if I was more strategic around it and was budgeting better, I probably would have been able to pay off more. So that was my way of paying off $40,000 in debt in 3 years. Let me know if you are on a similar journey, if you have any financial goals around paying off debt. I know how overwhelming it can feel sometimes. Not that I carried a lot of shame around having debt, depending on how it was spent. So around that time, the credit card debt that I had was because of my own doing. A lot of it wasn't really for future investments. It was more so just impulsive spending. And so that was something I really had to reflect on and be mindful of so that I didn't repeat in the future. So there was a little bit of shame and guilt around that, but just showing yourself compassion, because leading up to the point of me starting to really take paying off my debt seriously, I didn't have the knowledge and wisdom that I have now as to financial wellness and really putting in the effort into improving my financial literacy. So there's like this famous Maya Angelou quote that I love, and it is, do the best until you know you can do better. Then when you know better, do better. And I think that speaks to one of my top values, which is integrity. If you didn't know something, if you were ignorant to something, fine, you get a pass, right? But once you know something and that you're supposed to be doing something a certain way and you don't do it, I think that is when you aren't rising to your highest self. And so for me, I show myself compassion because I didn't know better at one point as to how to improve my finances, how to be more responsible around it. And when I did, I started taking those active steps. So I hope that you take into account some of the strategies I use to pay down my debts faster. I will make another video in more detail as to other ways that you can pay down your debts faster outside of what I've experienced and what I've just seen other people experience and do. But yeah, it feels so much better to be in a place where even if I do have debt, I know how to better manage it. I know that I was able to do it before paying off debt, so I could do it again. And it's really just a matter of me either increasing my income, decreasing my spending, continuing to budget and to look at my money so that I can take the next best steps instead of operating out of ignorance and avoidant and anxious attachment styles. Living my life in a way that grounds me emotionally, mentally, spiritually, so that I can show up and make the best decisions for myself and my finances and all the other areas of my life. So hopefully if you tune into my channel and you like this video and subscribe, you will see similar content around building up financial wellness, building wealth, and just improving our overall well-being and really just create the life that we love, that you love, that I love. I hope that this just inspires you to know that you are not going to be in this same space and place forever. You are going to grow. If you choose growth and you want growth, you will grow because it takes awareness. It takes that conscious effort and awareness to know that you want to stretch yourself. You want to be in a better place. And without that awareness, you won't grow. So once you are aware and you realize what needs to take place, what you desire deep down, a change in your physical state, in your environmental state, whatever kind of state it may be, then you can start to put the plan together, set SMART goals, and take action. I believe in you. If you want to work more closely with me around paying off your debts, you can definitely schedule a one-on-one strategy call, or I have a 12-week self-paced course. There's a whole module that walks you through how to pay off debt strategically. So definitely check out my services on my website or look in the description below. And if any way I can help you, please reach out. Please let me know. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.